I think that we're kind of amateur surgeons as musicians, you know, because we don't really know exactly what the connections are, but we know that there are connections. I mean, especially low frequency, because it vibrates your body. You know, the waves are like, some of the waves like 14, 15 feet long. So having those kind of waves go through you, it just kind of, you know, bends your innermost space and time, I guess, you know. And even the way that chord progressions work, through structure, you can make people feel pensive at the end of a measure, or you can make them feel resolved. I mean, that's what I've always loved about music, and especially instrumental music. Instrumental music a lot of times is more like an abstract painting, whereas lyrical music is more like impressionistic or realistic, you know?
Michal Menert, here we are. Man, so glad to have you here. So for everyone out there listening, Michal's an unbelievable producer of hip hop, soul, EDM music. So Michal, to start this off, you've got an EP coming out. Tell me a little bit about that.
It's an EP I made kind of over the last like 6 to 8 months, towards the end of my stay in California. You know, my mom has had some health issues recently, so I've moved back to Colorado to take care of her, and a lot of the music that kind of gets lumped in as electronic becomes kind of anxiety driven almost, you know, like it has like this hype or this build up where it motivates you to move, and I needed some stuff that motivated me to kind of chill. So I kind of made some songs without any samples, without any records, just kind of playing instruments and trying to make like an electronic album, but something that's more like along the lines of the stuff that when I was coming up, kind of the down tempo-y stuff, like the early Bonobo stuff, like the Fruiter and Dorfmeister type of stuff, you know? So the EP was kind of trying to be in a vein of just like it's called Body High. So it's trying to give you just kind of like elevate you without making you psyched out, you know? I wanted to make an album that I could enjoy in more than just a show. You know what I mean?
For sure. So, you know, on this podcast, we have jazz musicians on here. I love beautiful music. And then also like intense shredding, the whole myriad.
Yeah.
I want to talk about, so just using relaxing music as an example. Do you ever think about like, what about relaxing music, how that affects the mind of the listener, like psychologically, like what the dynamics of the music you're making are actually going to do to the mind of the listener?
Yeah. I mean, you know, it's something I've become more and more aware of as I grow up, and as I kind of get more of a spectrum of the different feelings and nuances of the life experience, you know? And as you evolve as a person, your feelings when you listen to certain types of music evolve. You start realizing that like certain things trigger certain responses in your body, you know? And your subconscious too. So yeah, for me, it's just been kind of searching for ways to find things that for me create a pleasing reaction, you know, while still encompassing some of like the bitter sweetness of life, not just too sugary. It's interesting because when I was working with Mickey Hart, we actually were trying to figure out ways to kind of heal the mind and damages in the mind through sound and through low frequency and stuff like that. So we were working with a bunch of specialists, neuroscientists and things like that. And he and I and Zakir Hussein worked on a drone project that was put out through what is it, Wanderlust, I think, a website that's kind of like more like a new agey kind of project that we did that was more droney and kind of rhythmic, trying to get people into the trance so that their mind can kind of heal. And you know, so through that I kind of became more attentive to the way that sound affects me, you know, and certain frequencies and like certain music when I listen to it. Like there's a lot of stuff that like I love at a live setting, but then if I listen to it in my car, I start like feeling really anxious, you know. And that wasn't always like that for me. Like it, you know, growing up, I feel like I was a lot less susceptible to that. But I think maybe just through, you know, it's like when you cook, you pay attention to certain spices, and then you're almost hyper aware of them when they're used or overused in certain restaurants or settings. So it's like once I delved a little deeper into the science of it and just really immerse myself through the work at Mickey's in kind of like the sound healing of low frequencies, it's hard for me to go back to just enjoying it without feeling those secondary impulses. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. What do you think it is like about music itself that can cause spiritual healing and actual like transformation at a health level?
I mean, it's vibration. It's like it's the way that that cats heal themselves through purring. You know what I mean? Like they create a low frequency and they vibrate with it, and it kind of aligns their cells. I think that we're kind of amateur surgeons as musicians, because we don't really know exactly what the connections are, but we know that there are connections, and we know that there are ways that bass and I mean, especially low frequency, because it vibrates your body more. The waves are like some of the waves like 14, 15 feet long, so having those kind of waves go through you, it just kind of uh, you know bends your innermost space and time, I guess. um, and then you think about melodies, the way that certain melodies and certain relationships, like dissonance and then harmony and different things, how they create kind of emotional and psychological reactions. Like they make you feel certain way. Like even if you don't know anything about music theory, if you hear uh, like discord, you feel a certain. It kind of gives you this like it throws you off a little bit. And then when you hear certain like harmonics, it makes you feel at ease, or it just kind of like resolves. And even the way that chord progressions work, where it's like you can have through structure, you can make people feel like pensive at the end of a measure, or you can make them feel like resolved, or you can make them feel anxious. Like different things that you can do just through the progression of things. So it's so I think that some of it is on like the cellular and vibrational level, and then some of it is just on our own psychological connection to different notes.
Mm.
I mean, that's what I've always loved about music, and I've said this before. It's like, and especially instrumental music, because I love music with lyrics, but it kind of streamlines to what you're thinking about when you're listening to that song. It becomes a love song, or it becomes a political song, or it becomes, whatever it is. Whereas like instrumental music, it can make me feel like, oh, this reminds me of being in the sunny meadow with my mom, and then someone else can be like, oh, like this reminds me of like the worst parts of my last relationship or whatever, and like all these different feelings that are all correct, but on different ends of the spectrum of the human experience. Which is like,
Mm.
I think it's beautiful, because it's like that's the part of it that I think is art. Not saying that it's like this high art or whatever, but I'm just saying that like how art is interpretive. Like you look at like an abstract painting, and it's like, and maybe that's what it is. Instrumental music a lot of times is more like an abstract painting, whereas lyrical music is more like impressionistic or realistic.
Mm. Mm. Michael, we're talking about harmony, resolving dissonance,
Yeah,
and then other musical things like dynamics, it
yeah,
changes in volume, space, these different aspects of music.
yeah.
Can you talk to me about maybe one or two in specific that you're particularly inspired by, that maybe you'd want to open up other musicians' eyes to placing a little more emphasis on?
um I think that dynamic is one of the main things that I think up and coming musicians um struggle with, because you want to make it as loud, especially in electronic music. You want to make it as loud and hard hitting as possible, and so you get these very, like, if you look at the waveform, you get these very boxy waves. So I think that having things that breathe a little bit, and even the dynamic in drumming, it's I mean, I work on the grid and stuff like that, but it's as most people do, that you work with electronic stuff, because you're working with uh time segments and whatnot. But you listen to music that was recorded before like the late 90s, early 2000s, rock music, the drummers weren't playing to a click, so it was breathing. Like it would slow down and speed up, and that even the dynamic that way just gives it a little humanity. I think that like um, there's that balance with electronic and dance music, where you want to have the syncopation, and you want to have the things in place so that people can lose themselves in it, and it has that kind of entrancing element. But you also want to have the humanity of dynamic and mistakes and little augmentations and changes. So it's not just completely rigid and just the same loop over and over again. So it's one of those things that I've always done with like drums and things like bass lines that are usually fairly simple, but like when you listen to a song, the bassist kind of plays and adds extra notes and little things here and there. And I've tried to do that with my drums and bass, even if I'm just sequencing it, and even if it stems from a loop. It's like I try to find ways to make it, put in little ghost notes on the snare, just little things here and there that sounds like a drummer that's getting bored of playing the same thing, so he's kind of spicing it up here and there, or a bassist that's not doing necessarily fills or solos, but is just kind of adding a few little grace notes here and there. And I think that those little elements, I mean, it's one of the things I think that modern bass music excels at, is that it has so much just uniqueness from section to section, where it just the sounds really evolve and morph, and the sounds themselves go on a journey. So yeah, dynamic I think is a main thing. And it's also when you listen to negative space, is one of the things that I think for me became very apparent, especially when you listen to hip hop, because a lot of the times, instead of having fills, they'll just drop out for a second, and kind of come back in, that kind of thing, where and people like Madlib are just geniuses at that, where they'll just use negative space, and it creates so much more energy than a fill would, or than something big, an explosion or something, or a build would right there. It just has this it just makes you appreciate it when it comes back. Jay Dilla was really good at that too. A lot of the giants that came and are still around and have been inspirational to us all. And I think a lot of that comes from using the limitations, like the SP12 had 10 seconds of sample time, so you couldn't really have that much in it. The MPC had like 32 seconds of sample time, so it's like you had these limitations where sometimes you couldn't add more. You would have your disk space would be full, so you'd be thinking of ways to take the elements that you have and reshape it. So I don't know if I'm veering off course or not, but
Talk to me about darkness in music and in art in general, and how you think it can be a beautiful thing.
Oh man, it's one of those things that I think most people need it. You need that contrast and the darkness in it, because our lives all have darkness in them. Even the happiest person has dark days, and so I think that there is a necessity to it's like the balance. You can't have the good without the bad, and it's like the darkness allows it to then the clouds to open up at some point, or it allows you to notice that the clouds came in. Again, it's a dynamic thing, as much as it is an emotional or vibe thing. It's like, you want the feelings to be dynamic, not just the speed or the sound or the velocity. And I mean, I love when songs have darkness and then they have resolution. Like that to me is, it's I think there's a part of me that, like, when I'm approaching something, I want to like do everything possible with the song sometimes. So it's like being able to take it successfully into both realms, where it goes dark, but then it kind of has like those moments of sunshine that shine through. That's when I feel like it's more of a all-encompassing song of what I'm trying to get out through art. Most times. Sometimes I want to just do silly shit too.
So Michael, if we can get a bit personal for a second, before this, I was moved listening to you on Andy Frasco's podcast, like preparing for this, where you reflected on your life and really the adversity that you've come from, that you've faced through. And can you talk to me about how, based on your experience, like what you've learned about dealing with anxiousness and fear and pain?
I mean, it's tough. It's like it's one of those things that's like you can learn to deal with it, but it's always there. It's like, I mean, for me at least, I feel like the more, the last 2 years of the pandemic have been very tough, I think, because there's been a lot of anxiety and a lot of uncertainty, and now with the economic state of the world and the United States kind of being in turmoil, and, prices just being crazy, but wages not following it, it's just, it's hard not to feel doomed, but I think that a lot of it too is the fact that we have so much information and so much stimulation with us at all times that like at any point you can like tune into the apocalypse, and feel like, oh, I'm watching everything fall apart in real time. But it's like, really, I think that being able to get outside and get outside of yourself and spend time away from, I mean, for me, like hiking and walking around and even just walking on the street, just takes me out of the zone. And you just see, you pass people on the road and you just see that people aren't all in conflict. You know what I mean? There's a lot more cohesion and and coexistence peacefully than what we're shown. And so, not to say that there isn't a huge strides that we need to make as a civilization and as a society to break down the remaining barriers, and not to say that there hasn't been more and more craziness around us in the last few years because of people being cooped up and whatnot. But I was thinking about it last night when I was having trouble sleeping, and it was, we worry so much about so many things. Like money is a big thing, because unfortunately jobs tie you to health insurance and things like that. So you're stuck in this state where when things become uncertain, or when things get more expensive or whatever, or at least I start feeling like, what's going to happen? Like, how are people going to survive? How are people going to get groceries? Like, um, but at the end of the day, I mean, we all carry on. My parents growing up, in the under Soviet control in Poland, um, they had times where there was nothing on the shelves. That they had times where it just seemed bleak, where you couldn't find toilet paper, where you couldn't find anything. And people helped each other out. People get by. And I always think about it like this. I always worry, but then I'm like, I've made it this far, and there's been lots of times where things have felt even worse than they feel now, and I just need to trust that it's part of the story, because very few stories start as like, this is what the characters planned, and then you turn the page and it's like, that's exactly what happened in the end. It's usually like, this is what they planned, everything went wrong, blah blah. The world was close to ending, and then at the end it all comes together. So it's like, I see turmoil as just part of the story now, as part of the journey towards the happy ending, and I'm not ready to give up, and I'm not ready for a happy ending just yet, I guess. so I guess just contextualizing all of it as part of your story, and realizing that, like, there's a chance in every moment of uncertainty to develop your character, I guess, and strengthen yourself against everything. And I also think that, I've been thinking about this a lot with the human mind. I think the human mind tends to focus more on negative things that happen to us, because it's a survival technique. Like, the positive things that happen, our mind's like, okay, cool, we got this, I don't need to think about that. But the negative things we fester over. So I think that it's like, the older you get and the more you experience, the more your mind has this bank of the different ways things went wrong, so that you don't do it in the future. So it can start feeling like you have these mounting failures in your subconscious, but really I think it's just your brain preparing you. And you can see all those mounting failures as like, that whole list of things that I was afraid of, I got through all of that,
Yeah, it's
and
like
this,
the memory bank of resilience
yeah,
almost.
exactly. You need to stop seeing it as failures and start seeing it as like, I made it past that. I felt like that was like the most humiliating time of my life, or like the worst time, whatever it was, it was the most pain I was ever in, or whatever. And I'm here now, and it's a different thing, but I'm going to overcome it just like I did that. And I think that if you feel that way, it's like and if you just don't give up, you get to a point where you're either going to make it, or you're going to die trying, and you're not going to know if you didn't make it. So
Does the concept of your death inspire you? Like, do you ever think about death? Are you at all, would you say,
yes,
afraid of
very much.
death?
I mean, I was afraid of death up until I got stabbed and almost died. And then it just, I remember laying there looking up at the stars when the paramedics were kind of rushing to the street, and just thinking, I was just thinking about the people I loved. My only want was to be like, I was like, man, it would be nice to be able to say goodbye to them, or whatever, or tell them I love them one more time. And it was kind of calming. Like, we're so afraid of death, but there, when I was, told that I possibly might die, and that I felt like I was dying because my body was kind of shutting down, there wasn't fear anymore, because at that point your brain doesn't have time for that. You're just kind of like, okay, cool, what do I need to do to just kind of become okay with this? And you know and really it seemed a lot more, even though it's hectic, it seemed in a weird way peaceful. The whole pre-death moment that I had kind of experienced, because I mean, honestly, I didn't think I was going to make it when like I realized how stabbed I was. you know I mean, I'm still afraid of things, I'm still cautious, but the idea of death, um I think the only thing that scares me is the death of people around me, because of the sadness of it, because I lost my dad, and my mom's sick right now, and You know, that part of it is scary, but it's also, again, it's a part of life, you know, and it happens to all of us. And I think that one of the things that I envy certain cultures about is that certain, you know, there's other cultures in the world that celebrate the passing of people, you know, and they see it as like they made it, they're on the other side, you know. Whereas I feel like a lot of Western culture sees it as a period of mourning and of loss, you know, rather than
Mm.
of kind of release.
Yeah, I've heard a take on death like our lives we are at the whim of like our organs. Like we have to go to the bathroom, we gotta wipe our sweaty armpits, we get hungry, we gotta eat. We're always like always at the whim of each of our individual body centers,
Yeah,
and death is kind of the unification of all of this and the
yeah,
ending of all problems. I don't
yeah.
just a hot take.
Yeah, and I mean, I try to think that, you know, that we're spiritual beings in physical forms, you know, and that it's just that there's, because I mean, you know, there's a whole us that happens when we're dreaming that has nothing to do with our bodies, you know, things like that. That it's just, you know, and it's weird because of the older I get, the more I feel like deja vu with past dreams of things that I've experienced in day to day life, where it's like it makes you think that there's just something more that's connecting kind of our subconscious with our conscious and our like a psychic plane, you know, kind of that we tap into at times. I don't know, you know, like it's just, I feel like these pieces are kind of coming together as I have deja vu of things that I had dreams of when I was 16, and all of a sudden I turn a corner somewhere when I'm on tour and I see like this street that looks exactly like that dream. And I'm like, well, this is crazy that my brain kind of prepared that snapshot and I can remember like the whole dream around it. And it's not exactly what's happening here, but it's just like it feels like there's pieces of both that are, you know, it's because it's like we know that there's pieces of things that we've experienced in dreams that kind of come back, like past lovers and weird things from growing up and whatnot. But I'm just starting to experience that there's things from past dreams that are happening in my day-to-day life now, you know, which is pretty cool.
Hypothetically speaking, let's just consider this concept you're bringing forward of this like enfolded inside like spiritual dream plane, however that might be. Let's just say it absolutely is a thing that exists,
Yeah.
and we're talking about it right now from a very like limited perspective. How do you feel like that indicates what music is, and how do you think that shapes that would theoretically shape the approach a musician should take?
I mean, should take is a hard thing because I think that one of the good things about music is that there's so many approaches, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
Could.
but for me, it's like it. Music is that dream world, you know. It's like music to me is lucid dreaming. You know, it's being able to control the surroundings of the world that I'm in. You know, in a way where it's and being able to, you know, it's in a weird way, music is like the worst alchemy because you take years of your life and then you put it into 3 minutes, you know? So it's like temporal alchemy, but in reverse. But then, you know, for me, it's beautiful because I can listen to songs from my friends or from myself that are from certain periods, and it's like looking through a photo album, you know?
Mm.
So that's the kind of dream element of it, where it's encapsulating a lot of things that are happening, good and bad, and the way that, you know, certain songs will stick with you for a period of your time, you know, and then you'll listen to it 5 years later and you'll be like, oh, that's that summer where I was hanging out with so and so, or that's the time I spent on the beach, you know, or whatever. Or oh, I remember going snowboarding and listening to this song all the time, you know, like those kind of things that then all of a sudden it becomes this more than just the song, you know, it becomes this snapshot. And to me, it's like I never felt photogenic. I always felt like when I took pictures of things when I was on vacation and stuff, it just never came the way my memories were, you know, whereas music to me is, you know, so it's like rather
Mm.
than having photo albums, I have like music albums, you know, where those things kind of conjure the memories and the fondness and the rosy colored glasses, so to speak, of memory, you know.
Michael, have you read any books that have been especially like impactful in you for you in your journey, the way you've evolved?
Lots of stuff, man. I love Kurt Vonnegut. I love Philip K. Dick. They both have different ways of kind of twisting reality. You know, Philip K. Dick's more of like the paranoid dystopia type of stuff. You know, Vonnegut to me, I love because I felt like his whole thing was like, man, we all take this so seriously, and on our deathbed, we're all going to laugh at ourselves. But in a spiritual sense, I think the Don Juan series by Carlos Castaneda,
Oh,
you know,
yo,
that to me was like, I read that in like the end of high school, and it was just like one of those things that kind of at the time was helping affirm a lot of the, you know, the journeys I was taking.
yo, talk about Carlos Castaneda for a second. I'm a huge fan. I would love to take a moment with this.
Oh man, I mean, like the teachings of Don Juan, I like it because it explored kind of the metaphysical part of psychedelics and of spirituality and of kind of being able to use your mind to like astral project and transform and alchemize the world around you. Growing up on things like comic books, it was like the real world comic books almost, where it's like these superheroes on psychedelics, kind of being able to leap across plateaus and things, with their minds. To me, it was just very eye opening because at the time I hadn't, like now there's a lot more access to different kind of psychedelic journeys and things like that have been documented and written about. But for me, it was like at a time where the internet wasn't as good of a source back in the late '90s when I was in high school, and so that was like one of the first things that I could access, where I was like, wow, like there's people that are doing these things that me and my friends kind of dream about and talk about and envision when we're in an altered state or whatever, and just the medicine man healer kind of aspect of it too, like that part of it, that's always been something that I, like just herbal medicine and things like that is just it's incredible. My family, my mom is a plant pathologist, but like, one of the things about growing up in Poland is a lot of things were made from scratch. So we would have like cough syrup made from pine needles that you take like the buds of fresh pine and you put it in alcohol and sugar and you soak it, and then it'd be cough syrup you'd have at home, things like that. So my parents would make these kind of homemade tinctures and herbal remedies. So that always kind of intrigued me because to me it worked just as good as the over-the-counter stuff that had a ton of chemicals in it. In Polish, there's this thing called pukshiva that's like a weed that like burns your skin, but it's also like crazy anti-inflammatory, and it's supposed to like ward off arthritis and stuff like that. So it's like these things that you do that kind of hurt you, but then heal you. With
A
herbs
little
and
bit like darkness in music, right?
yeah, exactly. When I was touring with the Dead, I met this Shumash medicine man elder named Kot, and he was on the same bus as us, and he was a very wise and hilarious person, and he had great stories. But he'd always talk about how medicine men would smoke tobacco and take these things that they knew would kind of shorten their lifespan, but it was to kind of get more out of it. Like it'd be for a purpose. Like it'd be like this, you trade a little darkness for a little light at that time. And then he also talked about how anything that has and you see this a lot when you learn about some of your favorite huge acts, and you realize all these bands were fighting and all the crazy stuff that you hear from people on the road, where there's like crazy darkness behind the light that they bring, and it's just, that's the way a lens works. It has to kind of flip it upside down and then project it, and so it's like, for it to be that bright on that side, there's going to be a little bit of darkness on the other, at least. I kind of welcome the bad times because it's a lot easier to write at those times, because I feel like you're kind of cornered by life, and it's a lot harder to write when you're super happy and everything's going good, and you're just like, well, everything's fucking awesome. I wonder what I'm going to write about. It's hard to kind of, for me, I'm sure that there's tons of people that would disagree, but for me, it's just, I write better when I'm in a funk. So, and when there's things that are kind of gnawing at me, that I have to get out, because then I think some of that darkness and some of the bittersweetness kind of comes out in those moments, because it's coming from a real place in your life onto the music,
Coming from a real place. Michael, man, so great to make your acquaintance here, dude.
Likewise.
So what can we be excited about? I know you're working on another album.
Yes.
EP just came out.
So Body High is kind of like the mellow out kind of, like microdose and chill kind of vibe. And then I'm working on like an electro soul kind of heavier, more geared towards live and kind of the upbeat atmosphere EP that I'm hoping to put out on Philos as well. I don't have a name for it yet, but it's kind of got a theme of fire. It kind of starts with burning the whole world down and then rebuilding. So that's kind of the or burning yourself down, or seeing everything that you love burned. Because I had a house burned down in 2004, 2005 when we were on the road. Someone came in and set our house on fire, and we like lost our studio and our bedrooms and everything, and all our gear. And then recently I had the warehouse that had all my merchandise burned down. So I lost everything there. um so it's been a bit of,
And you're just laughing about it, just making music about it.
There's so many people that have lost so much more to fire in Colorado and in California and in all kinds of states, that around the world. Wildfire is no joke. So I think that's one of those things that was kind of on my mind, and it kind of became this underlying theme where I was finding little vocal samples about fire and about things, uh, about coming out of the ashes and kind of rising like a phoenix, that kind of feel. So the album inadvertently kind of starts with seeing things burn and ends with the warm embers kind of keeping you warm and warming your life for the next chapter. So
I can't wait to listen, dude. I'm going to be binging your shit after knowing more about like the Wizard of Oz behind the sounds.
Oh, thanks, man.
Michal Menert at what is it? At Michal Menert?
At Michal Menert, MICHALMENERT. And then I got Body High dropping through Philos 325. And then another album after that, and another album after that, until someone takes me.
Well, shit. Can't wait to listen. Michal, my man, thanks again.
Cheers, man. Have a good day.
You made it this far. Thank you for listening, and a big thank you to our sponsors, Hemp Relief CBD, SEM Tickets, Devil Wind Brewing, and Artillery Productions. We got links in the description below. Go check out all the awesome stuff they've got going on, and yeah, much love, everyone.